mainstream media says no one's here. What do you say, Colazzo?
I say everybody's here.
Once again, everybody, and welcome to Broadway Comedy Club Radio. I'm your host, Clayton Fletcher, here in New York, where you can see it's very bright. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can see it's very bright behind me today. I don't know what's going on, but I guess the sun is shining, or perhaps the world is ending. Who knows? Happy January to everyone. I want to wish you all a happy new year. We've got great feedback. Al Martin is my co-host. He is also the owner and booker of Broadway Comedy Club itself, and the author of the new amazing book all about comedy. It's called Did It on a Dare. So, Al, welcome. How are you, sir?
I'm feeling great. Very good, Clayton. Excited about our guest. Excited that we're all getting a few extra bucks from our esteemed government.
Yes.
And just excited about everything.
Al Martin feeling stimulated by the stimulus, apparently. Al, we got a lot of great, we got a lot of great feedback last week. Someone actually wrote me on Facebook and asked me why, when I introduce you, do I always say the owner and booker? But you know, Al, I think it's important that you book your own club, because a lot of club owners don't. They don't know enough comedians to book their own club, or they just want to be business people and not actually. But you're actually in the trenches. Like you would take an active role. For those who don't know, the booker of a comedy club is a very important position, because you basically are responsible for what talent ends up on stage. So, Al, a few words about being booker, please.
Well, if you haven't gotten booked lately at the club, Clayton, it's because I am not booking the club right now.
Well, no one is, so that's okay.
But actually, even before that, Rich Brooks has been handling more of the booking for me. I get involved in certain shows and stuff like that, but not as much as I used to. Though now with this pandemic, who knows? I need something to do.
Yeah. Well, that's why we're cranking out these podcast episodes like it's going out of style. But
Right.
Yeah, people enjoyed our conversation with James. A lot of people wrote to us and said, we're glad you guys are back, because we did take like a 2-year hiatus from this, Al. So it's nice to be back and doing things again. And we've got a lot of spectacular guests lined up, not the least of which is today's guest, who is one of my all-time favorite comedians. He's hilarious. He's a regular headliner, international headliner. He also performs quite often at Broadway Comedy Club when there is a stage for him to perform on there. Really, really funny guy. Political activist and possible domestic terrorist, Kevin Downey Jr. on the podcast. Kevin, how are you? Nice shirt. For those who are listening on the podcast, he's wearing an American Pride, American flag T-shirt. Is that a sign that you're an insurrectionist of some kind? Kevin, talk to us about this.
I prefer the term patriot.
Okay.
There are those calling me traitor, insurrectionist, and rioter, but I prefer good down-home American boy.
Right. So you were in Washington on the day when everything that we keep hearing about on the news happened, and people entered the Capitol building without permission. So why don't you talk to us a little bit about that? I know Al has a lot of questions about your day in D.C.
Sure. So my fiance and I, Jessica Colazzo, also a comic, went to see the president speak. We're big fans. I think we're up to 9 flags and 34 T-shirts, including hoodies. And we were happy to, and hats all over, hats galore. We were happy to see him. It was thrilling. I was a little weepy when he came out. It was great. We listened to him speak, and the truth be told, I had heard everything he had said. The speech was a little lacklusterish near the end. I was like, okay, all right, we're cold. We got to go. So there was nothing that I found to be inciting at all. I didn't walk away from there going, yeah, let's go, rip up the Capitol. People left early and started walking over. And then
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, so we started walking over. And at one point, we're in a parking lot. And I said to my fiance, I said to Jessica, I said, we're actually in the parking lot of the Capitol. How are all these people here? You'd think they'd have something to keep us from getting in. And we didn't look for the parking lot. We were just following the herd. And then we got beyond that, and we were at the base of the Capitol, and there were hundreds of thousands of us, and we're just doing our chants, stop the steal, do your job, blah, blah, blah. And we're at the back of the Capitol, which I don't know if you're familiar with it, but there's a couple of stairwells, and it doesn't look like the front. There's different levels and different things. And we're standing there and we're cheering, and a guy climbs up some scaffolding, and everyone starts to cheer and wave their flag. And at this point, I can see probably 8 guards, and there are 3 on this main narrow stairwell. That's going to be very important in about 40 seconds, because there are 3 there, and some guy walked up with a flag and just started talking to him. We were way in the back, but I could see that there was no hostility. They were just talking. Then at once, all the cops disappeared. Maybe as the crowd got bigger, and someone yelled, "They're retreating." And so some people just started going forward. And then we heard tear gas going off, boom, boom. And we thought they were fireworks or something. We couldn't see what was going on around this corner. And 10 minutes later, people are coming back just covered. I don't know if you've ever seen anyone that's been pepper sprayed or tear gas, but they are miserable. They're miserable. It looks like they're crying at their grandmother's funeral and their dogs all in once. Horrible accident. And at one point, there were no cops, and there were 2 doors at the back, and people just started filing in. Like, despite what we saw on TV, there were thousands of people that got in easily because there was no one there to stop them. They actually, at one entrance, were letting people in. And so people went in, and keep in mind, most of the people there, I saw a guy who's probably 68 who had been pepper sprayed. He was no threat to anyone. I saw a young girl with her boyfriend, about 24. She got pepper sprayed or tear gas or something. I was talking to a 70-year-old woman who was there. They didn't get tear gas. But this is sort of an older crowd. I mean, there were some younger people. This is an over 40 crowd. And we had no idea that there was any violence going on whatsoever, because we just didn't see it. We didn't see anything. All we saw were people yelling and cheering, and they would go in. They would go into the Capitol, and they'd come out covered in pepper spray. And there's another person to take their place. These people had no fear. And they didn't pepper spray everyone. You had to go up to the police line that was inside. We couldn't see it. But if you just went in, took a selfie, and ran out, they didn't care. So they were allowed to do that. And then at one point, they said, all right, that's enough. And they started pushing people out. I saw no violence. In fact, what I did, I saw a guy push a riot cop, and 4 Trump supporters jumped on the guy and said, no, we don't do that. We don't do that. I saw a guy come out of the Capitol. He was carrying a coat rack. Apparently, he was getting warm and needed to take off his jacket. He was carrying a coat rack that he stole. A woman started screaming at him, "Put that back. We don't steal, they do." So if anything, the Trumpers were policing themselves. And I hate that people died. That's horrible. I didn't see anyone die. I didn't see any violence. I saw cops with clubs and a cop with a shotgun, but everyone at the back just said, "Okay, yeah, it's time to go, I guess." And everyone just sort of left.
So it's safe to say, I think, that just like there was a distinction made over the riots that occurred in the summer, that some people were there just for a quiet protest to express issues relating to Black Lives Matter, that this particular event that you went to had the same component. There were mostly, the overwhelming amount of people were there for peaceful purposes, to state what they wanted to state, constitutionally protected freedoms of expression. And then there were, I guess like in every crowd, a few people that were hell-bent on something a lot worse, that the overwhelming majority of people like yourself were not aware that was going on. Would that be right?
That's 100% accurate, Al. We saw nothing. We weren't there to start fights. I mean, I'm going to tell you something. I'm not a tough guy. The security cops don't look at me and go, "Uh-oh, here comes Duran. Back off, everyone." But it was 99.99999% peaceful. And like you said, well, like if those Portland riots, you know, they had like 1,000 people in the day and a bunch of grandmothers, and at night Antifa came out and they would fight, and they've been doing that for over 220 nights. A lot of people don't know that because it's not in the news, but it's been over 220 nights of riots in Portland alone since May. And I will tell you this, not one firebomb was chucked at a cop. There were no lasers pointed at the cops. Obviously, we saw people fighting with the cops. But I don't know if you guys saw this, but did you see that a BLM activist was arrested inside?
No, I didn't.
It's on Fox News. If you Google BLM activists arrested in Capitol, you have to search all that. They called
I bet you that would be the only network it's on. You wouldn't see this on MSNBC or CNN.
No, that guy, he got caught and he said, well, I'm just here to document the whole thing. Okay, well, you know what? I'm just here to document this bank at 3 a.m. I'm not robbing it. These guys are. I'm just taking pictures. So there's proof that there were other elements going on that are not Trump related.
Kevin, did you actually go inside the Capitol yourself? Did you actually walk in?
Well, if I did, that would make me a domestic terrorist. So let's say, no, I didn't do that. So,
Yes.
all of our friends at the FBI I don't even know how many people have like sent my name and Jessica's name to the FBI. We've gotten threats from people just for being there.
Well, you know what's scary to me? Growing up during the Cold War in the 60s and 70s and even early 80s until Reagan sat down and hammered things out with Gorbachev to whatever degree. We grew up with this. We were taught, you know, in Soviet style states that people would rat each other out, you know, would say, be careful what you say, even to your own family. You never know when someone is working for the state, quote unquote. And it's just horrifying to me to see whether it's a neighbor calling on a comedy club because they have 4 people standing outside smoking a cigarette, or whether it's this kind of thing where people might recognize a comedian and his fiancée girlfriend just hanging around at an event and then start reporting them maliciously. Like, what has happened to us as a society?
You know, that's a great question. I wish I had an answer, Al. I think what happened is the media downplayed all of the riots all summer. Now, if you look at DC in May and June, it was burning, and those weren't Trumpers doing it. And we didn't start any fires, but everyone focused on, you know, those 10 or whatever it was, 15 bad eggs that were fighting with the cops. Never mind what BLM and Antifa was doing all summer long and continues to do. We didn't take over part of the city. We didn't burn stuff. We didn't occupy a federal building for 4 days. You know, I mean, they ran into it. They took selfies. They ran out, and a bunch of people got beaten up. But that, you know, there's just some dividing line now where it's us against them, and someone, it's like some woman I've never heard of, some comic said, well, let's make a list of all the comics that were there. And suddenly Jessica and I are on this list. I've never heard of this. She can't afford me anyway.
You know, that's a good line. You know what, Kevin, let's not even give any oxygen to that whole movement to start banning comedians for their political views. I mean, look, if you went to Washington with the intention of inciting violence, and once you got there and you saw your opportunity to commit federal crimes and do as much damage as you can because you're angry about how the election turned out, then yeah, I think you ought to be in jail. But it sounds to me, at least, you know, from what you're saying now, it sounds like you went to Washington to hear the president speak. And last time I checked, that's not a crime. So, you know, at what point do we start to draw lines between not everyone who was in Washington, D.C. on the day that the Capitol was stormed is guilty of something?
I think the biggest criminal here in the whole thing is the media. Yeah. People are going to have their opinions one way or another. But there was always a time when I was growing up, at least, and now maybe I'm just a dinosaur, but when I was growing up, you'd watch a newscaster like Walter Cronkite. Now, if you watched Walter Cronkite, generally you would never know where he stood politically on an issue. He reported the news, both sides equally. And you know, it turned out afterwards, once he was long gone from the scene, that he was a liberal, about as liberal as they came, but you never knew that. You know, Bob Hope was about as conservative as they come, but when he was on stage, you never knew that, you know, and we've really blurred the lines now of what is news, what is the actual news reporting arm of CNN, and what is their commentators' personal positions, like Cuomo or whoever else is on the various shows, Chris Cuomo or Jake Tapper or Wolf Blitzer. You know, you don't know anymore who's giving you their opinions and who's giving you the news. And the fact that you can watch CNN and Fox News and not hear certain stories on both sides is criminal to the American public, because it's that kind of information is the oxygen to formulate our opinions. And if we don't have the right information, we can't possibly formulate intelligent opinions. That's why you got to listen to all the networks and decide for yourself, because they're tainting this stuff really badly, and they're the real criminals in this whole thing.
You know, Al, I've had a bug up my keister about the media for years. I agree 100%. You have to go to 2 or 3 different places, and you'll read the same story, or you'll hear it and you'll walk away with 3 different points of view. And it's just like Walter Cronkite, like you said, he was great, but those days are over. Now people only know the 20 minutes they absorbed from Don Lemon or whomever it is, and they run with that. Like people are telling me, all right, so this is absolutely true. I saw 2 Confederate flags at the Trump rally. I saw hundreds of Black, brown, and Asian people. And when I tell people that, they say, you're lying, you're a racist. I saw the video. And I said, no, you saw the video they want you to see. Okay, you saw the video of the idiot with the flag. You didn't see the 5 Black people hanging out peacefully at the rally. The media is evil to me, because they not only pick which stories we do and do not hear, but they pick on how we hear them. Never mind the 400,000 peaceful people. Never mind all the minorities. Now, what's important is, you know, the 3 rednecks, you know, that are breaking in here, and then two of them have flags. Yeah, people focus on that and they think they know what's going on.
Well, the difference between Walter Cronkite and today, I think we can all agree, is money. You know, there never used to be a lot of money to be made by reporting the news. I mean, nowadays, the most profitable network on television is Fox News. And right up there in the top 10 or so is CNN. And then, so they're making money from the news. And the way to do that is to present the news in the most exciting and controversial way as possible. But what happens is the people that watch one network or the other tend to agree with the viewpoints presented on that network or the other, rather than where Walter Cronkite and you know, those of his ilk would just share the truth of what happened, and the rest of us could make up our own minds. Nowadays, we are being told what to think along with what happened. And as far as what they do, presenting the news in a certain way, only showing you what they want you to see, it reminds me years ago when I lived in Richmond, Virginia, there was a conservative gay couple that lived next door to me, and we became friends because they overheard me playing the piano one day, knocked on the door and brought me some banana muffins and said, "Can we listen to you play the piano?" Really sweet, you know.
Was it Broadway tunes?
I was playing Les Miserables, I believe.
Well, there you go. Not the stereotype.
Yeah, they're not breaking any stereotypes there. But anyway, I became friendly with these guys. And one thing that I noticed was that they weren't what I knew about gay people, because I was from the theater world, where generally speaking, the gay people in the theater world are very flamboyant. You know, a lot of dressing like women if they're men, just kind of, rhinestones and glitz and glamour, like that kind of thing. That was kind of what I thought gay people were. My experience with gay people had generally been like that. And then these guys come along and they look like people that would have gone to my church growing up. And I never would have thought that they were gay, except they outed themselves to me or whatever. And it kind of opened my eyes to the fact that what we see on television many times is only part of the story. Like if you ever attend a pride parade, you will see plenty of rhinestones and glitz and glamour. And, don't get me wrong, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I actually love it. But on the other side, there are just as many homosexuals and bisexuals and whatever that don't necessarily look the part. But they'll never get on TV because it's much more interesting to show Omaha, Nebraska. Look at these crazy parades that were happening in San Francisco. And look how flamboyant it is. And look how glamorous it is. Instead of just saying, look, different kinds of people come from all walks of life. There will be Black people at a Trump rally. Believe it or not, there will be guys in a conservative looking coat and tie who happen to be gay at the pride parade. But it's the kind of things that they just want to show you what they want you to see, because for whatever reason, they think that's the way they want to present the news. So that's always bothered me for many, many years. And I just see it more and more, especially when it comes to politics.
Well, that was that. Remember that episode we had a couple of years ago, Clayton, where we talked about identity politics?
Yeah.
And you weren't really at the time familiar with that term. And this is really where it comes down to, everything is being done with an eye towards identity politics. And to me, that's one of those evils of the world. Let's not change the fact to fit demographics. Just report the facts. That's all, whichever way they come out.
I'm from Detroit, so I follow news in Detroit. And there was an article I was reading online that says 2 transgendered women shot. And I thought, oh my God, that's horrible. Let me read that. And it turns out 2 guys were shooting at each other. One guy missed and hit these 2 transgendered women. Wasn't aiming for them. It was stray bullets. But the headline was 2 transgendered women shot. And they were shot, but they weren't the targets. The story should have been 2 guys shoot at each other and miss. Innocent bystanders hit. But it wasn't sold that way. Because the truth is, I probably wouldn't have read that story if it just said, another gunfight in Detroit. It happens every night. But when they said 2 transgender women shot, I thought, oh, that's horrible. I got to read about that.
Yeah,
Right.
That's the identity politics coming into play. Look at the story about the kid who had his cell phone stolen, or the woman who lost her cell phone and she thought that it was a kid who stole it. The story is so mundane. If you're like, woman falsely accuses teenager of stealing her phone, but as soon as it's white woman accuses Black teen of stealing her phone, now we have a story. Now we can get a lot of clicks. Yeah, we can make some money off this one. Yeah.
Now, what I find fascinating, so I've known Kevin a long, long time. I think we even opened mic together many, many years ago at Shutters, Eagle Tavern, whatever. And so question is, were you always, it says formally that you're a libertarian. Were you always a libertarian, or were you like most comedians at one time, mostly liberal Democrat? Were you always this way? Not to sound like you're retarded or, I can't use that word, sorry.
No, I know what you mean. And no, I'll be honest, Al, and you guys, you live in New York, you'll understand this, and other people may not. I was not only a liberal, I was a New York City liberal, which is the worst kind of liberal to be, because they look down on everyone. They look down on liberals from Long Island and New Jersey or Staten Island. Like, if you're not a Manhattan liberal, then you're nothing. So I was one of those horrible human beings. And one day, you guys might know John Truson from Governor's Comedy Club.
Sure.
No, John. Yeah.
Sure.
Good friend of mine and a libertarian. And one day he said to me, he goes, He goes, I can't believe you're liberal. You're pretty smart. And I said, well, what is that supposed to mean? And in 3 hours, he made me realize I'm not a liberal, and I became a libertarian. And from there, it was just an easy step over to Trump and to, in some ways, Republican. I don't see me voting for another Democrat for the rest of my life, but I'm always going to be open-minded enough to say, well, let's see who's doing what now. But yeah, to answer your question, Al, I was a grotesque liberal from New York City.
Not only did you make the transition over to your politics, but from what I read and following your Facebook, Jessica's your fiance or girlfriend now? Fiance. So she was a liberal too, right? At one time, and
yes, she voted for Hillary, and over the last few years, we had become friends before we were dating, and we would talk about politics. And she said, "Wow, I've been tricked. I've been absolutely tricked and lied to." And she started paying attention to what's going on, and Trump has had so many successes that so much of the media doesn't talk about. But I would show it to her. I'd say, "Hey, look what Trump just did. Look what Trump just did. Look, another peace deal with Israel. Look." And she, I don't know, a couple of years ago, just became a huge Trumper.
Well, that's a strong-minded person, someone that's open to listening, because there's a lot of couples where the guy might feel one way, the woman another, and nobody changes their mind either way. So for her to have an open mind and to think for herself, I think is a great thing. It's so rare nowadays.
I'm impressed and I'm proud of her for being able to do that. I agree with you, Al. It's not, a lot of people can't do that. They won't do that. I'm not sure what it is.
Kevin, I don't recommend marrying a woman who knows how to think for herself. You're in for a long I wanted to ask you, because a lot of people think that if you vote for Trump, you must be racist, you must be homophobic, you must be against minorities, you must be, they kind of have they lump every Trump supporter in, for example, with the guy who wears the Camp Auschwitz sweatshirt that they can't stop showing on the news 24/7, right? So
right.
First of all, your thoughts on Auschwitz, and second of all, any comments on why you would vote for Trump, and what you would say to those who assume that everyone who votes for Trump is, xenophobic, misogynist, whatever.
Well, first of all, I'll point out that Jessica is 100% Puerto Rican, and she's a member of the LGBT community. She's a B. And so when people say, "Oh, you're a racist," she goes, "But I'm a Puerto Rican bisexual." Like, no, I am exactly what you don't want to believe exists. And people just choke on that. There were tons of Black people there. There are tons of Asian people there, like Asian more than I would say Asian or Hispanic the most, but still lots of Black people. But yeah, they just
you personally, Kevin, why did you vote for Trump? What is it about Trump that made you say, this is how I want to cast my vote this time around?
When he started a primary, I just thought, oh well, this will be entertaining.
Yeah.
And then I watched him speak, and I thought, he's right. These are ugly truths that people don't want to deal with. Not everyone coming across the border from Guatemala or Mexico is a rapist, but there are enough that you have to protect women here and say, no, we're not going to let this happen anymore. There's enough fentanyl coming over that I think 52,000 people die every year. That's the Vietnam War in 1 year. Like, there are enough reasons. It has nothing to do with the race of the people that are bringing it over. Their skin color doesn't matter. I mean, if, I don't know, let's say Denmark had settled in, Central America or the Southern US, and those were white people coming over, I wouldn't want them. Their skin color doesn't matter. But I think the left makes everything about melatonin. Everything comes down to race with them. Like, you don't want people coming over the border. Well, you're racist. No, actually, I'm engaged to a person who's Spanish. I don't want the drugs. I don't want the crime. And I don't care what color those people are. But the left makes everything about race. Look at Kamala Harris.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Kamala Harris, the only reason she got the nod is because she's part Black. And they said, well, we have to check that box off.
Yeah, it's horrible. I think your point cannot be made any more clear that when this virus first was discovered, President Trump said we must close the borders from China. And right away, everybody was over, you're racist, you're against Asian people, you're a horrible human being. Then now, in the latest second or third surge of this virus, Governor Cuomo announces we will not take anybody in from the United Kingdom because of this new variant. So why is it okay not to take in people from the UK, but it's racist to say where the virus started, we're not taking people from there? I mean,
because they're white. They're the people from England
exactly.
are white.
So that's a very major point. You're screwing around with my life because you want to play identity politics. Here's a better one. Did you hear Governor Dum Dum yesterday? Cuomo just announced we cannot go another year. We're keeping our businesses closed. We will not have anything to reopen to. Where the hell has this guy been for the last 6 months, keeping us closed, based on a 1.5% positivity rate in indoor dining? I mean, this guy's a complete fake boob, is what he is.
And the best part, Al, the best part is not only does he have no idea what he's doing, not only did he kill 11,000 elderly people, he wrote a book about his leadership skills.
Right. And the people who don't really look and check the sheet, that don't investigate, you got to see their comments on Facebook. Oh, he's a god. He's a great human being.
They gave him an Emmy Award.
Thousands by keeping us imprisoned in our apartments for the last year.
Yep.
All right, so
Kevin,
Kevin,
a very important quick question.
go ahead, Al.
And I think this is relevant to all of us because I find it very funny when this thing takes place, and it happened to me many years ago. But has this affected you getting any kind of work? Has anybody taken this out on you because of your political stance and and how you feel about things? Are they cracking down, would you say, on right-leaning comedians and entertainers?
I would say to some extent, yes. It's affected me a little bit. I can name a couple of people who suddenly stopped responding to my emails. There is a guy that was booking me, but for no reason that I can find, he decided that I was a racist because I voted for Trump. So I won't be sending him avails anymore. I just don't want to work.
I mean, if you want to mention anybody, you're more than welcome to, but if you feel better not to, that's fine too.
You know what? I tell you what, I'm going to hold on to those names now, but in the future, if something comes up, maybe I can come on again and we can talk more, because I don't know how this is going to fall out.
Right. They, in comedy, people could change their mind after a while.
Exactly. But yeah, I know comics, and you know them, Al. I know that there are people you've booked who are big headliners, and they come out to me as Trump supporters. They come out to me like gay men in the 60s. Like, hey, Kevin, don't tell anyone, but I love Trump.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, and I also find there, let's not even take the what is considered one of the most liberal states, New York, and just put a stamp on it as, everybody in New York is liberal. I see a very big divide between comics in Manhattan and comics in Long Island or New Jersey. There's a very big contingent of comics in Nassau and especially Suffolk County that lean Republican or to the right.
Yeah, Long Island voted Trump. I mean, we know this. Like that.
Yeah.
Staten Island and Long Island are the Trump areas of, our kind of general area, as well as, different parts of New Jersey. But, what I want to ask both of you, and I guess I'll start with you, Kevin, how do we fix this? Right now it's like, if you don't agree with me, you must be, and then I a bunch of horrible things I can call you. So if you don't agree with me, you're a Nazi, or you're a fascist, or you're a racist, or you're, this phobic or that phobic. And same on the other side, if you see things another way, you're a communist, you're a libtard, you're this, you're that. Like, how do we fix this? Does anyone have a vested interest in fixing this? Or is this just how life in America is going to be until the world explodes?
My opinion of that would be, once Trump is gone, the dust will settle a little bit. Not a lot, because right now there are 75 to 80 million Trump voters who are very, very angry. But I really don't know how it settles, because I've noticed the left, the tolerant left, is completely intolerant of anyone that thinks differently. Like, you know what? I don't care. Like, there are people that I think are borderline communists, but I can still talk to them because that's their opinion. But they can't talk to me, and because they think I'm a racist.
You know, it's very scary to me, Kevin and Clayton, that, you know, the career politicians, they're politicians. The guys like Joe Biden, Pelosi, Schumer, they're, you know, they say one thing to your face. They make, you know, they see each other in a steakhouse or in the congressional restaurant or in the steam room, and they, whatever it is, and they make their little deals, and, you know, it's between them. But what really scares me and what really is frightening to me, and I would hope there's a crackdown on this, is the whole big tech and how they've rolled over and allowed their personal feelings to, you know, not only eliminate, but destroy any competition. Like, Parler started, millions of people went to that platform innocently because they felt their information was not accurate or being censored, and there's a lot of evidence to prove that. And then the next thing you know, Parler is shut down, and then Amazon won't carry it on the Google, you know, Apple won't carry it on their store, App Store, Android the same. I mean, it's ridiculous.
You're right, Al. It is ridiculous, but and not to deja vu here, but I want to ask again and see if we can maybe come up with some positivity here. How do we fix this? What event do you see happening that could put things on the right track? Because right now, the division seems to be getting worse, right? And
Yeah,
you know, all the things you point out with tech, you know, making an even bigger chasm than there used to be, like, that's all true. But what do you think it would take to get things going the way they should, which is we can actually disagree and still have a conversation?
well, I agree with Kevin. You know, it's going to be the removal of what these people feel is the real threat, and the what's the word, lightning rod, to get people. You know, only once in every couple of generations does a lightning rod with charisma come along to inspire people for better or for worse. In the 1940s, in the 1930s, it was Franklin FDR that, you know, rallied a country behind, you know, a number of programs to get out of the Great Depression. In Europe, unfortunately, it was a megalomaniac like Hitler that galvanized his people. In our country, Reagan had a movement in 1980 that was very powerful, and then came along Trump. Now, I agree with Kevin. As Trump fades in this election cycle, we might have a year or two of calmness, but it's like Kevin also said, there are 80 million people. I know 75 million people are claimed to have voted for him, but it might be 80 million. We don't really know that voted for him. And you know, that's 50% of our country. A very sizable population feels that they've been jobbed. And not only have they been jobbed and screwed out of their vote and their mindset, there has been nothing done to bring them under the tent. And that's more important. There's been nothing done to make them feel like we can compromise. The left now control, and we've seen this before. They've had all three chambers under their control before. And then what happens is they start pushing a lot of their lunacy, like packing the court to have 14 representatives, 2 extra states, opening borders, all this stuff. And then they don't realize they're only 25% of the population, the extreme liberals. And the other 75% of Americans don't want to hear this stuff. You heard it right after the election when a congresswoman said, we don't need to hear this crap. It cost us, like 12 seats in the House. If they continue to press the best thing in the world that can happen for the Republicans is to write off the next 2 years, let the Democrats, come up with every loony policy they can, one after another. American public will realize it, get terrified, and they'll vote. The House will go Republican in 2022.
Very
without
good
any
points,
doubt.
Al. We are running very short of time, so Kevin, I wanted to give you the final word here. Any thoughts on the impeachment, or what do you think the world will look like with a Democrat in both the executive and the legislative branch? Just kind of give us a final summary before we have to say goodbye.
Okay. Thanks. First of all, thanks for having me on, you guys. This has been great. I want to say something going back to what Al said. I want to say that there are 75 to 80 million people who are angry and convinced we've got communism coming our way. And now I will tell you this, I stopped in a rest area on the way home it was all Trump supporters, and they had no problems. They didn't like the violence, but they had no problems going into the Capitol because they're tired of marching peacefully. They feel it gets them nowhere. I think socialism is on the horizon. I think it's here. And I hope Al's right. I hope we get to vote them out. But a lot of us are afraid that now that the Democrats have cheated in election, they know how to do it. And it's going to look like this forever. That's what we're afraid.
Wow, that's such a grim
Either
note
that
to
or
leave it on.
Republicans start to get some of these guys on their team,
Al, every week we do this podcast, and every week I try to find something positive, and it's just it's getting doomier and gloomier each and every time. Kevin,
well, you're talking
tell
to
people,
comedians, Clayton.
Kevin, tell people how they can find you on social media or wherever else you may reside virtually.
Okay, depending on what time it is, you can probably still find me on Twitter and Facebook. But go to MeWe and go to Gab. I'm all over those because that's the bunker that we're headed to.
Keeping himself safe on MeWe and Gab. That is Kevin Downey Jr. Al, I'll give you the last word. What do you want to say, buddy?
Yeah, I think this has been a great episode. It's so with what's going on right now. And, I'm glad that Kevin gave us some insight as to what actually went on that day from a person that was there and, doesn't really have an agenda. It's just telling us exactly what it was.
Yeah, well, there's nothing like a firsthand account. So, Kevin, we really appreciate you being here. So for Kevin Downey Jr., for Al Martin, and of course, for our wonderful producer, Jay Frank, I'm Clayton Fletcher. Thank you very much for listening.
Hi, Al Martin here, owner of the Broadway Comedy Club and Greenwich Village Comedy Club in New York City. And I just authored a great book on stand-up comedy and my 30-year journey called Did It on a Dare, How I Built a Comedy Empire in 30 Short Years. So if you want an interesting story on the comedy scene in the 90s and early 2000s up until the present, if you're an aspiring comic and want to learn about some of my golden rules of comedy from a comedy club owner, this is the book for you. It's available on Amazon, and just go to Amazon, click Al Martin, and it'll take you right to my page. It's available on audio and Kindle as well as paperback. Thank you.